Welcome, everyone, to the Tuesday edition of the RotoWire NFL podcast brought to you by Circa Sports. I'm Joe Bartel. Alongside me every Tuesday is Jake Letarski. We're talking auction or salary cap league, whatever format or word you choose to use, strategy, recapping what happened in our main draft, the stake league draft, and the strategies that you need to help dominate your auction or salary cap league. And, of course, lots of breaking news, possibly a Brandon Ayuk trade happening live as we're going on. So we'll try to get to all that right now. Again, welcome everyone to the Tuesday edition of the RotoWire NFL podcast brought to you by Circa Sports. I'm Joe Bartel, and with me is Jake Letarski. We're going to be talking. This is going to be the most heavy listen about our draft podcast you will hear on this entire network or entire time during the lead up, I guess, to draft season, because we're going to be using a lot of our techniques and examples that occurred in last night's stake league draft, which, if you are not familiar, is probably the biggest draft at the office. It's a $50 entry fee. You're playing for some prizes, but the real deal is making sure that the top half of the league gets their steak meal paid for from the bottom half of the league in terms of total points. That bill was nearly $400 per person last year, and
it exceeded. It was a record. There was a wine situation where the waiters were real smart. The waiters were real smart. Listen, I used to be in the industry. They were smart. They didn't ask, "Would you like me to open another bottle of wine?" They asked, would you like some more wine? And the answer to that question for everybody is naturally yes, right? But then next thing you know, we spend $1,000 on wine. So anyway,
and much more. Thanks to one table in particular with Jake at it, which is it's been a record high now 3 years in a row. Hopefully it won't be 4 years in a row, but I feel pretty good about my team. So maybe I won't have to be paying this massive price tag that has now become a tradition here at the office. So we'll talk about those strategies themselves, along with really recapping what has been a busy 48 hours of news. I know you're sort of catching up, Jake. I imagine a lot of the listening the listening audience is as well too. And I will toss it out there. If you are watching live and you do see news on the Brandon Ayuk trade, which again sounds like it is coming down the pipeline in the next hour or so, the Steelers have finalized a deal on their end, according to a tweet from Ian Rappaport. It does not seem as if the Niners have agreed to hit the accept button, if this is like we're using our real life trade scenarios, but we'll see as that ends up progressing. I am at home doing the podcast, having a little bit of vacation time right now, but you're, of course, in office, Jake. So we'll dive into, I do want to get a word from our sponsors before we get to all this news, though, from Circa Sports. Of course, the Circa Million and Survivor are both back and bigger than ever with $16 million in total prizes across the two contests. You must enter Nevada, but you can play from anywhere. Entries are open until September 7th at 2 p.m. Sign up at Circa Resort and Casino in Las Vegas. Of course, the Circa Million has a top prize of $1 million and $6 million in total prizes. You pick 5 teams against the spread each week. There's quarterly and full season payouts, and there's 100% payback to the players. The Circa Survivor competition has a prize pool of at least $10 million guaranteed. You just pick one team. If they win, you advance, you move on, you do that 20 times in a row, and you are set to be part of the Circa Survivor winner overall. Go to circasports.com/contest to learn more about both of those. Today, we will be in Circa Sports, or at least I will be next week, as we have a few of our remote writers and I guess guys do the new stuff. We'll be doing a lot of live shows there. I'm not sure if our podcast gets affected by that, Jake, or if it's going to be more of the latter half stages. I know SiriusXM shows will be kind of debating that too. So looking forward to being back out there again, just after getting to do a retreat from Circa Sports. There's a lot of breaking, I guess, big news, relatively breaking news. The first I think we'll start out with consequential players is Jahmyr Gibbs, who directly, and I mean like maybe even seconds after our side of the stake league draft was officially confirmed done, was reportedly carted off with a leg injury. That was actually not true, but he did leave practice yesterday with what was deemed to be a hamstring injury. We don't know really the severity of it, other than it seemed relatively serious from the team's perspective. We've seen a lot of these injuries, the DeAndre Hopkins of the world. We'll get to Marquise Brown, Hollywood Brown in a second as well. They're deemed serious, and I'm putting this in air quotes. And it's always conveniently within the time frame of possibly playing week 1 or week 2. It sounds like Jahmyr Gibbs will at least not play in the preseason. Adam Schefter had hopped on the Pat McAfee show and basically gave a no information answer as to, I think he won't play in the preseason. We'll see what happens week 1. But Jahmyr Gibbs, hamstring injury. How nervous are you if you have Gibbs right now?
I mean, going into the year, I really like Gibbs. I think that he had true breakout potential. Montgomery doesn't do a whole lot for me here. The backup, or the alleged starter on the depth chart, right, David Montgomery. But now obviously everything's changed a little bit. You never really know with hamstring injuries. This could be nothing. It could be something. It's so early to tell right now. But I certainly devalue him going into the draft because a hamstring doesn't just like come and go for 1 week. It's something that could linger for a lot of the season here. And Jahmyr Gibbs went for an astronomical price in our stake league yesterday, and that could be the first buyer move of the season. We'll wait and see what's going on here. But, at the very least, he's going to miss some valuable early reps. It's only his second season. And, we'll see what his usage is like early on. He was on a per touch basis. He was amazing last year. He just needs to get the touches. He's certainly better than David Montgomery. Definitely a bigger playmaker. And, just he makes more happen. The offense runs better when he gets his touches here. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think at least early on, Montgomery is going to profile to get a lot more work. And I wonder, as somebody that was probably going around the late 6th, early 7th of his redraft value, now bumps up to the Joe Mixon range, maybe ahead of Aaron Jones, who was like an early 6th, late 5th sort of guy. Mm-hmm. And that's off the expectation that Jahmyr Gibbs is only missing a game, but theoretically still hampered by whatever hamstring injury this is. And I think that's the biggest question mark is, okay, if Gibbs is out, who is benefiting? And I don't know if there is an answer. Offensively, it makes me a little bit more worried about Jared Goff. I think there's a lot of expectations for him. Sam Laporta is already being drafted as one of the top 2 or 3 tight ends overall. I would be worried about his value to a certain extent if Gibbs is, maybe Laporta gets focused more, but then do defenses focus more? And is the same conversation applying to Amon-Ra St. Brown? It's not good.
Extrapolated all the
way.
No,
that's fine. I'm just saying it's not good. This is not a positive in any sort of way.
For sure. I just wanted to see how the market is adjusting a little bit. And, if you go from NFFC drafts from the beginning here, Gibbs ADP was 10, and NFFC drafts yesterday, which, had, of course, possibly some of them, went on before
happened,
the news
or
happened like during our stake league auction, right as the news was happening. He only went down to 13, so not too bad yet. We'll see what happens when we, throw in today's, if it'll even do that. But yeah, so the market's definitely reacting to some degree here. He's dropping out of the first round in these cases.
Jonathan Taylor would be probably selected after. We'd have to see, like Puka Nacua is another late first round guy that has an injury as well during preseason. Yep. He's been impacted. Maybe he slides back up. Marquise Brown, we got an update on his injury. Of course, I think it was either during the game or some practice on the weekend, injured his shoulder joint. I'm not going to bother trying to say the name of what it exactly is. It's a rare injury, but I guess thankfully the Chiefs medical staff has dealt with this before, back with Tyreek Hill in 2019. It's been confirmed that he's going to be out at least 4 to 6 weeks, which was the exact time frame for Tyreek Hill. Our own injury expert, Jeff Stotts, who does a lot of really good content for us for the baseball injuries and football injuries, has said that this really shouldn't impact his ADP at all. Marquise Brown was going in that 6th round, 7th round range, maybe a little bit higher in certain aggressive formats or best balls. And that Tyreek Hill, when he eventually came back after 4 weeks for this injury, was perfectly fine, producing at a per point basis that was exactly normal to what he's done. So I ended up getting Marquise Brown in our stake league. There wasn't that idea. I didn't actually read that article beforehand, but I want to capitalize on some depreciated prices at receiver, getting some depth, and we'll talk about the overall strategy in a little bit. But I guess this is good news. Were you investing in Marquise Brown a whole lot at this point?
Honestly, not really a whole lot here. We still don't have a suspension for sure for Rashee Rice yet, do we? No,
it's not been announced.
Still no word on league discipline. Who knows if he even gets league discipline? I guess we'll have to wait and see here. So no, I wasn't really. I mean, you still get Rice, Kelsey. I think Xavier Worthy's going to have a role in that offense. I have not really pounced on any Hollywood Brown shares yet. Just kind of waiting to see how the market adjusts to some degree. Change of scenery. Not that I necessarily am going to avoid him entirely. He's okay in the middle tier. If you get him at the price, but personally, I've been a little bit out on him. And of course, Alan Seslowski always likes to say, right? Injuries will find you. Yeah. No. One of his things that I always remember, he's like, injuries will find you, right? You don't have to go out and find injuries here. So that's probably somebody that I need to see a pretty steep discount on to go and grab. I'm not necessarily in the buy low to hold injured guys on my team. Now, granted, I paid $9 for Nick Chubb at Stake League yesterday. So, I guess I found one already for me, but, knock on wood here. The rest
you can't quit Nick Chubb though. You've rostered him like 4 years in a row at this point. I feel like.
He has been a stake league staple, and at least 3 of those 4 years I was an eater. So when I can get him for a fourth of the price that I've ever paid for him ever before, why not?
You're infamous for always going after Clayton Kershaw in stake league baseball. I feel like Nick Chubb is turning into your football version of Clayton Kershaw in that regard. Yeah, you're right. And Alan's got a good point that injuries will find you. You don't go out seeking them. When there's a discount, though, and I think for a player that I was pretty high on entering the year, that's where I'm taking a little bit of pause. If I can get Marquise Brown ahead of the Keon Coleman, Lab McConkey range of receivers, Rice probably rises up a little bit more. As the days go on, we don't hear about suspension. It seems like he's more and more going to play. I will take that opportunity to pounce on a guy that I think will make a major difference over Xavier Worthy in that Chiefs offense. So again, Marquise Brown out 4 to 6 weeks with that sternoclavicle joint injury. Again, Tyreek Hill had dealt with that and then returned relatively fine after that 4-week period. That would mean that Marquise Brown misses probably week 1, if not week 2, but we'll have the rest of the season to get better. We'll have to see if that applies for first-round rookie quarterback J.J. McCarthy, who had a pretty good debut Saturday from a preseason perspective, did throw that interception, but had 2 touchdowns, and then had mentioned that he had some knee soreness. Turns out after an MRI that he has a meniscus either tear or something like that.
It doesn't say tear. It says meniscus
it's really
issue. It says meniscus.
Really
They're pretty vague on that.
With the wording, because tear would mean possibly out for the season. I think you back in your high school days had a meniscus injury, right?
No, this wasn't me. Back in high school, if you tore your meniscus, you just let it grind out, the bones grind on each other and played through it.
Played it out,
right? Yeah, I guess these pros handle it a little bit differently.
Which they should.
Back in my day, right now. Let's see here. He complained about knee soreness over the weekend. Underwent an MRI. Knee surgery, meniscus issue. That's pretty much all we got, but this is also a situation here in Minnesota where, like we talked about a couple weeks ago, Sam Darnold was first on the depth chart anyway. And if anything, if the brass wants to roll with the veteran, feel more comfortable, they've got their own jobs to worry about too here. And let the rookie sit. This gives them a perfect reason to do so here. So suddenly Sam Darnold probably comes into play in 2 quarterback leagues, at least at the very end, in those leagues where everyone's getting taken. If we were doing fab for our dynasty league right now, I'd probably throw in a bid on Darnold because you could use him, and he's got a weapon like Justin Jefferson. So, he's not going to throw up all duds. We know that. So that's pretty much how I react to this news. Neither of these players were getting taken in redraft, really. Who I never saw J.J. McCarthy get drafted in any kind of a 12-team single quarterback redraft. It was always those different kinds of formats. So Darnold gets pushed up to the end of some of those super flex leagues, and that's about how I'm reacting to this, because I would bet that he ends up getting a couple of starts at least out of this, and he might have been getting a couple of starts anyway. So, 4 starts, 6 starts, none of that would surprise me. I
think Darnold plays probably until October, if not more. The Vikings really need to be cautious with their main asset at quarterback and all the injuries they've had in their secondary in particular. I think it's just whatever. This is already seems like the season of hell for Minnesota. Just ride it out. Make sure that you have McCarthy completely healthy before you throw him into that starting lineup. One final note, at least of active news that we have. So today, Tyrone Tracy, rookie 5th-round running back for the Giants, was carted off in an air cast and then taken to a hospital due to an ankle injury. Safe to say that his season is done. I had looked at Jake across my 30 best balls. I had about 5%, so that would be, not more than 2 or 3 leagues that I took him in. He was normally going in the 14th or 15th round, and the idea was, well, Devin Singletary is just a guy. The front office invested in Tyrone Tracy if it was an early day 3 pick, and he was more of a pass catching specialist at that too. Does that have value with Daniel Jones? I think that's worth mentioning. That maybe doesn't. Either way, it appears like his season is done after suffering that injury again during training camp. So Tyrone Tracy out likely for the season, although it hasn't been confirmed yet. Mm-hmm. McCarthy having some sort of meniscus injury that would expect to keep him out at least the first couple of weeks of the season. Yep. Marquise Brown, same spot. And then Jahmyr Gibbs, TBD with this hamstring injury. And of course, we still have that Brandon Ayuk news that we're waiting on.
I'm looking. I can't see nothing yet. If I seem distracted, that's because I'm looking at the tweet deck here.
Good.
One quick side note, I guess on Trace here, I guess it compares to anyone. When you import all of your leagues on RotoWire's My League feature, right? You can go through, and when you go to a player's profile, like Tyrone Tracy, for example, you can see all the leagues that you have him in. And of course, I drafted him in the staff dynasty league. Used one of the 2 picks I had that I didn't trade away because I get rid of all my picks every year because me, I'm rookie averse. This is interesting. I mean, Singletary was a $15 buy around there, 15 to 19. Our draft went weird. We'll get into this in a bit. He was 19-21 projected in the range for most values. He ended up going a little bit cheaper because of the breaks at that tier. But his value definitely goes way up because look at the rest of that depth chart. Eric Gray, Dante Miller, Lorenzo Lingard. Have you heard of any of those guys?
So, no. That's where I think that the Giants could be a trade candidate for a Khalil Herbert or Damian Pierce or whatever one of these guys that's like year 2 or year 3 fall out of favor in their depth chart. I think they will be quick to acquire a backup, but we'll have to see. There's a lot of the veteran guys. I mean, I don't think Kareem Hunt is still on a team, right? Like that kind of caliber of player. They could sign Delvin Cook, make their Madden overall team be way higher because that is stupid right now. Whatever. I've been playing a lot of Madden, Jake, so that's why it's on my mind.
Yes, I know. You took the whole vacation to play Madden, I believe, right?
I'm doing the podcast with you. It was a half-day vacation. Let's be clear, Jake. Let's be clear.
When was the last time you slept? That's the question.
It's been a little bit.
Between the kid and the new video game. That's the question. Yeah.
Yeah. It's been a little bit. Let's take a break for Blue Wire. Then we'll come back with some of the auction tips and strategies that we kind of went over or discovered is not the correct word, but really unearthed as we were going through this draft that took place again yesterday at the RotoWire office. Okay, we're back. And again, recapping the Stake League draft, this will probably be this is what happened in our draft we'll do throughout the entire year. We try to be avoiding that, but it's more to point to examples that happened to give you, the listeners, an idea of
basically what we're doing is we're listing the principles, talking through the strategy, and then we'll say, and then we'll have one league to kind of link it back to, a little bit and try to put a real life example behind the theory. That's why we can redo this show every year. A lot of the principles are going to be the same as past years, but within the context of the 2024 player pool. And of course, we're both fresh off of this. And to be clear for our listeners, we weren't in the same auction, right? There are 2 different 14-team auctions. So what we're going to do sometimes is compare the pricings and trends with both of our separate auctions that we did.
Right. So again, for the Stake League, the big prize for us, if you're in the top half of the total points scored weeks 1 through 18, we go through the whole season, then you get your entire Stake League meal paid for by the bottom half. And there's 2 separate divisions. It's the Wisconsin group or the Madison, Wisconsin, specifically in our office. So basically everyone around the area. And then there's the California side of things. And when there are 2 14-team leagues, that means there are 28 people. I would say it's like 16 or 18 Wisconsin Madison guys. Is that correct, Jake, more or less?
Yep.
And then the 10 from the California side. So they have their own separate bet and when they do it, but typically, again, that's what we're shooting for from our side. And while you and I are in different divisions and different leagues, we are still competing for the overall prize.
Yes, or we'll both be eating.
Or that's I thankfully, given the record high price last year, was an eater, so I did not have to have my meal paid or somebody paid for my meal. But yes, I guess, how do you want to start this, Jake? Because there's a lot of different principles that I think are very obvious, but still are worth mentioning, and also things that typically happen, and at least in our league, weren't. So, what direction do you want to go?
So, like any draft strategy, any show that we do, whether it's Superflex, whether it's single keepers, dynasty, what have you here, we want to make a general game plan for how you're going to allocate your budget. And what they always say, obviously I'm the UFC editor at RotoWire as well, your game plan's all well and great until you get punched in the face, right? So you do need to be ready to adjust that on the fly. So yes, people like doing tiers for auctions is a very common strategy sometimes, but you can't be too beholden to them. And you could say, okay, I'm going to spend $5 on quarterbacks and $60 on running backs. You can split up your budget that way, but say you only spend $5 on quarterbacks and suddenly you have a chance to get Pat Mahomes for $12, or Shannon got him for 13 on our side. So there's you definitely have to be flexible and adaptable. You don't need to have, we're going to give you some principles, but they don't necessarily need to be very rigid principles here. So do you want to each talk about our team a little bit and how we arrived at that and some trends in our draft, or should we just kind of go right into, here's auction commandment number 1?
Let's, because I had a pretty specific strategy when I came into things. So I've done this now, boy, I don't know, 7 years, 8 years. You've probably done this draft even longer. And the 2 years prior to last year, I had struggled. I had bought Jonathan Taylor at his absolute peak. Of course, he got injured at that point. I had been one that would try to spread out my budget all the way through, and there really wasn't a strategy that felt like it worked. It was often related to injuries at the running back position and guessing on my running back 2 and investing more. So the way I had this planned out, and I actually had this incorrect because I thought it was 2 receivers and a flex, not 3 receivers and a flex. But math wise, I was thinking I want one of those 5 or 6 quarterbacks. I want that tier for me, which is Stroud at 6. But if you were to throw in Anthony Richardson or Joe Burrow and extend that even to 7 or 8, fine. I was going to get one of those quarterbacks. I'm budgeting in my mind to pay the upper echelon price. I'm thinking at minimum 15 for quarterback. And I thought I'm going to have to pay at least $42 for Josh Jacobs, who I believe is a running back 1, but I thought the market really wasn't going to go there. We've seen that in past. You think of like Nick Chubb, you paid that price last year, who was a late first round pick. Jacobs' ADP isn't quite there, but we're a pretty sharp draft. I thought maybe that'll be there. So I had basically set those 2 markers. I'm going to pay 42 for my running back 1, and I'm going to pay something like 15 to 18 for my quarterback. Mm-hmm. And likely, if I'm doing the math, it's either I'm skimping out on wide receiver 3 or flex, or I'm going to go completely cheap at tight end. That worked brilliantly last year when I had a $1 Sam Laporta and felt very confident knowing there would be those type of tight ends left.
Yep.
I don't think that's available this year. Mm-hmm. So I was a little bit more hesitant. I ended up getting $1 Pat Freiermuth, which is basically kind of what I'm shooting for if I'm punting completely at tight end. But that was the starting principle. That was the idea. I'm going to pay up quarterback, and that running back 1 price will be X, whatever it is.
Exactly. So like me going in, it's generally pretty similar. Very rarely am I in on the Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts tier of quarterbacks. There's always been, in my experience with Stake League, there's either a quarterback somebody forgets about or a quarterback that you can buy low on. And generally, I don't like to go over $10. 10, 11 max is what I put for quarterback. And this year, I actually executed that part of it brilliantly. If I could draft quarterbacks like I did this year every year, I would be amazed because, we've talked about how I like Joe Burrow before. I think his price is way too low coming off of injury. He's still got those crazy good weapons. I got him for $7. And I thought that was a pretty solid price here, especially when someone, 30 minutes later in the draft ends up getting Jaden Daniels for $9. Now, would I have rather had Pat Mahomes for 13, who also fell quite a bit? Sure. And Lamar Jackson was up at 17, and I think Josh Allen and maybe Jalen Hurts were the only ones to surpass 20. So usually I'm not going to be that guy that spends 20 on quarterback, because the thing is in a 14-team league with all these players off the board, you're going to have at least one weakness on your team. Very rarely, if ever, even if you don't have any bench, if you fill your bench with dollar players, there's going to be one weakness in your starting lineup here. So going into this year, I let that go be determined on the fly based on how my team came together. And this year, it turned out my weakness was RB2. I purchased Isaiah Pacheco for $38. I thought that was a pretty decent buy. If you look at, I think, Joe, you got an article coming tomorrow. Maybe we do some comps. But the biggest difference in our draft is that every top-end running back went for $5 to $10 more than anybody's projection. So that was a pretty big deal. And to get Pacheco to not be priced, like Jahmyr Gibbs went for 53, Christian McCaffrey went for 60. And remember, people only have a $200 budget, and there's 14 teams out here. So, there's a lot going on there. So I ended up punting RB2 and basically getting a ragtag bunch of guys that I'm hoping one of them ends up being okay beyond Pacheco. And then with tight end this year, I have gone the $1 tight end route before, but I think this year, at least on paper, there are 6, 7, 8 tight ends that I think I landed on that are all pretty good. So I was happy to get, I was planning to get one of those tight ends in the, if I could get them for under 10, great. I didn't want to pay too much more than 15, and I ended up settling on $13 for Kittle. But also towards the end of the draft, when it got to dollar days and there were people that were forgotten about, I got $2 Dallas Goedert just in case, because I know Kittle will sooner or later miss some kind of game due to injury over the course of the year. That's just kind of how it is. And then I went hard on my starting wide receivers, basically. Didn't take the very, very top tier. I mean, in my mind, Cooper Kupp is going to end up in the top tier. I think they're running that offense back through him again this year. And he was the most expensive, maybe a little bit of an overbuy at 35. Mike Evans, $30, never the sexy pick, right? But always the most consistent one. And in Stake League, it's very much a not a buyer pick, right? I last year made the mistake of getting too happy early, spending all my money on Justin Jefferson and Kelsey right away. And what do you know? We snapped a 5-year eating streak. So this year, I definitely knew I was going to be more patient and more balanced. and ending up, with Burrow, Pacheco, Mike Evans, Cooper Kupp, George Pickens, and T. Higgins. I wanted to get T. Higgins to pair with Burrow here, and 25 was, kind of a fair price, and $13 Kittle. I think I'm good. The only spot that really stands out there is RB2, where it's like, okay, I got $9 Nick Chubb, who's going to miss some time. And in the meantime, I got to replace him with $2 Trey Benson, $2 Tyler Algier. I always end up getting Algier just because I think people overvalue BGen. And then $3 Blake Corum, which I know you're going to be upset about because you had to pay what for Blake Corum?
$10. Yeah, $10 on Blake Corum. Well, so because I want to put a bow on this initial idea, both of us, and this is, I think this needs to be true, no matter if you've been a 15-year veteran at auction or different formats like this, or if you are just starting out for the first time, you do need to have a strategy. And not like I have my tiers of quarterbacks ranking, I'll just kind of find. Like, you need to have a budget set as to how much you want to differentiate to each position. Mm-hmm. And I would go down literally and write how much it is. And then you're aware. So if I spend $3 more making sure I get $15 Kyle Pitts, then I need to take that $3 out of a different position. Is it quarterback? Is it running back, wide receiver? Having your tiers, or if we're using RotoWire's tiers, for example, with positions, that's great too. You can then kind of be aware of where comfortability levels. Mm-hmm. But this then runs into the next issue. And I think it was very prevalent on our side. But the time in which players are going up in an auction, whether you are nominating them or you are just watching as a bystander to this process, is really, really important in constructing the best team possible in this kind of salary cap format.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. The timing, and that's why tiers are important, because when you say timing it, you don't want to end up in a bidding war for the last of a tier. And that's kind of basically what happened to. So, McCaffrey goes off the board, BJ, Breece Hall goes off the board. Some people think that the last first round running back then was Saquon Barkley or Jahmyr Gibbs, and they ended up going for just $1 or $2 less than Breece Hall and BJ Robinson, because people wanted to jump in and get in the bidding war for the last of a tier. So your best bet is to try to anticipate a couple players before a tier one's out. And of course, you never want to just bid on a guy that you don't necessarily like. Obviously, you have to like the guy, but you want to anticipate and get in a few players ahead. That's why, Pacheco is a second round pick. I got him for $38. I like that because he was one that came up earlier in the auction. And I knew that in a couple more backs, there were going to be 3 or more backs in my mind before that tier ran out. And those last 1 or 2 were going to go for way too much. So I think I timed it right in this situation, getting Pacheco. And that also kind of brings you to another point here about how do you handle early in the auction, the first couple nominations, because I've always had a theory where, sometimes the very first guy, I'm usually in on the first guy to some degree, right? I find that there's a discount because the market hasn't been set, and it's a little bit of sometimes it can be a little bit of a trap. On our side, we've got our guy Ryan, who the last 2 years now has bought the first 5 players nominated no matter what.
I was going to point this out. Keep going though. Keep going.
And personally, obviously it didn't work out for him last year. I don't think it's going to this year either.
No. Hold on. Ryan nearly won the league last year. He actually, yes, he crushed it because he got a windfall of free agent Kyron Williams and a few other running backs.
Okay.
But that is a strategy. I'm not knocking Ryan out, but keep going because I'll have a counter to this. But keep going with your thought because I like it.
Yeah, so you have to. It's really hard because you're going to have preset values. You definitely have to have a guide to go on, whether it's RotoWire's guide or whatever show, or even I like to compare a handful of sources and get a range of prices. I think of players in a range and not necessarily have a strict value. But for example, if Christian McCaffrey is going and you have him priced at 58, let's just say that's common for a lot of formats here. But but it's the first pick in the auction, and his bid gets up to 61 or 62, I think you go ahead and bid on that, because a lot of times, your draft will get real bid happy early on and then realize later that they're out of money. and some people want to save it, but like I've seen players that are ranked 2, 3, 4 in the positional rankings go for more than the first place person or the number 1 ranked person So often, whether it's football, baseball, any kind of auction that I've ever done, I've seen these guys that are down in the rankings go for much higher. So that would be the reasoning behind jumping on that first pick. Now, sometimes the whole first picks can get out of hand. That was the same. It happened to me last year with Justin Jefferson. I paid way too much for him. It was something in the 60s for him last year, and it definitely burned me. But I do think that a lot of times there's value in getting that one of those first couple guys off the board, as long as you can exercise some type of caution and draw the line there once he goes way over your projection. But definitely more than anything, don't hesitate to bid $1 or $2 over your whatever projection set you're using on that first guy.
I like that idea, and I'm going to counter with an important fact that applies to everything. Any draft that you do, I think this matters. But first, I want to get a word from our sponsors here. Fantasy Sports Knockout. Fantasy Sports Knockout, where a fantasy league meets a knockout pool, an innovative take on fantasy football. The concept is, of course, simple. You choose a new fantasy lineup each week and score more points the same way you would any other fantasy league. But you must choose your players wisely because you can only use each player one time. The lowest weekly score is eliminated from the contest each week. The contest may be simple, but survival is not. How will you play? Do you load up early on the players and play the matchups, or save the better players for later on? Fantasy Sports Knockout. Can you survive the fantasy? Sign up at play.fantasysportsknockout.com today. Also, word from Fantrax. Is there something you wish your fantasy league had, or features that are missing from your current league? Bonus scoring, custom scheduler playoffs, deeper team settings? We'll look no further because we have you covered with our friends at Fantrax. Fantrax is the most customizable fantasy platform in the industry, offering the greatest fantasy experience for your dynasty, keeper, redraft, and best ball leagues. Fantrax even offers college fantasy football leagues as well. Create or join Fantasy Commissioner, invite your friends, and dominate your draft this season. Fantrax is the top dynasty fantasy football platform in the industry. Coming from another service? Well, that's not an issue because Fantrax can easily import any of your current leagues and rosters. Ever have a trade go wrong or make a mistake dropping a player? Well, Fantrax commissioner tools allow you to undo any move with one simple click. Fantrax is running a special promotion that you don't want to miss. Sign up for free at fantrax.com/RotoWire today to enter for your chance to win tickets to a regular season NFL game for you and your entire league, plus $6K in spending cash. That's right. Tickets for your entire league plus $6K in cash. Simply create a new league or bring over your existing league for more chances to win. Go to fantrax.com/RotoWire and sign up today. Fantrax, the home of fantasy sports. Jake, before we had our ad break there, you had mentioned that going aggressively early to get, and aggressively is not the correct word. Mm-hmm. Being mindful of spending up $1 or $2 on that first guy is the right approach. But I would counter by saying you need to know your league. If your league is a league full of experts, like literally mine was, we're talking about Peter Shanke, founder of Fantasy Sports, it feels like. Jeff Erickson, been on the air for 40 years now, kicking everyone's butt. Chris Liss, right? I can go down the list of guys that were in my league. A lot of people have done this sort of format before, and they're veterans to veterans to any strategy, but certainly let's go ahead and be aggressive. Let's go get our guy at $1 or $2. There's going to be value. They will price enforce. And for those of you who are new to this, price enforce would mean literally make sure by pressing one up every time that this player will be close to whatever Christian McCaffrey's value is, or whatever the market that's been set, they will price enforce to where the ADP or custom rankings is set. That when you are in that kind of league and you know those types of players, I have found if you're just waiting back, there are going to be moments and opportunities. And I'm going to pose this to you, Jake. Is not something that works at RotoWire, but if you're doing a friends and family auction league, let's just say it's in Madison, Wisconsin, or Wisconsin in general, where we are the beer capital of the world, right? We've had some beverages. There's maybe an hour and a half in. People are by the bonfire. They're getting some food. I'm just going to go ahead and throw out there CJ Stroud when there's been 8 other quarterbacks off the board. Want to guess how much he would go for in that circumstance? I bet it's less than what the custom rankings would indicate, or whatever your pro, unless people are really on top of things. How about
you said when 8 quarterbacks are already off the board? I would argue that he would go higher because there are only 4 teams that need a quarterback.
So you would be right.
And those
except
4 teams,
this literally happened in our league where CJ Stroud, who I think, and I would imagine a lot of those people in the league value pretty similar, not quite to Mahomes, but if you said $2 or $3 less than Mahomes' price, fine, or right around that Jordan Love. Like, would you rather have CJ Stroud or Brock Purdy? Stroud, right? Every time CJ Stroud
by like a big long
CJ Stroud or Jordan Love. You're a Packer fan, right?
Stroud by a mile.
Okay, and Stroud in our league went for only $1 more than Brock Purdy or Jordan Love, and you would think that it's because, well, the Stroud should get priced up. He's the end of the tier, and he was. But I was able to correctly identify, and it was literally just by watching when people were bidding or maybe not as aggressively going after other players, that this is a lull point in the draft. Now, I did this when we're online. I'm not able to see people's faces. Ken Kreitz, who is frankly great at all these different drafts, but very annoying about his pee breaks that he need to have. Had maybe mentioned in the chat by 6 points that time that he needed to go potty. Fine. But I felt like there was a lull, and I capitalized and got a CJ Stroud value when I knew that there was a bunch of other quarterbacks off the board. The only reason, Jake, that I saw that was because it exactly happened last year when I was trying to get quarterbacks in this tier. And I thought, I'll be able to sneak in Trevor Lawrence. It didn't work, but there was a quarterback maybe an hour earlier when I was reviewing the article I wrote that was able to be that capitalization. So I think it's knowing your league, and the only positions where you can get away with doing this little sneak tier thing is quarterback or tight end. Because the people that are going to pay by quarterback, like me, have already resigned that they're going to do so. People are going to pay up a tight end, just like you have already decided they are going to do that. And once they've done it, there are the other 4 or 5 that have said, no, I'm going to wait on the Pat Freiermuths, or I'm going to wait on the Jaden Daniels of the world or wherever else. I think that's the only circumstance where you can pull off that kind of maneuver.
Yep. I do want to backtrack just 1 second because you mentioned the term price enforcement, because we try to make this a 101 show. I just wanted to define that real quick here. When you price enforce, it's basically because you see a player that's about to go off the board for way cheaper than their projected value, and you basically push the bid button, figuring that the person you're bidding against will go one up. Or you see a guy, people used to do this to me with Kershaw in the baseball auction, right? They knew I would pay anything to get Clayton Kershaw no matter what. So they would continue to bid up and make me spend more of their money. So price enforcing to some degree, I mean, you have to be pretty comfortable in your auction to do this, because
you do.
like it would basically be like, Jahmyr Gibbs is a bad example because of injury. It's like, Saquon Barkley is about to go for $29. No one seems to like Saquon Barkley. But somebody does, because they're at him at $29. So you push the bid button to make them pay 31 instead of 29. And maybe you push it again to make them pay 33 instead of 29 in the first place. So that's what price enforcing is called. And to some degree, there were a couple times in this auction where, yes, I bid on players I did not want because I knew the next person was going to throw another dollar out there, and then I maybe even did it again. So you're playing a dangerous game because you don't want to end up with a player you don't want, and you have to be perfectly willing to eat that player if you need to. But if done carefully and correctly, price enforcing just makes less money for other owners to have, and can really help you at the end of the draft here when you're trying to pick up those value guys and you maybe only have $5 or $6 left.
And it's also about waiting out the rest of the league to also identify, this player is a value, right? So you mentioned Saquon Barkley, which is a good example. A $29 Saquon Barkley is probably 7 or 8, more or less, where he should go. Maybe he needs to be like in the 40 range, 41 range. I guess that's more than 7 or 8.
That's usually
so you might not like Saquon Barkley, but we're going to go ahead and bid it up 1. I'll wait to maybe 4 seconds left on the clock, bid it up again. Now Jim Bob Sue just saw that was a value too. Okay. Jerry's projection rankings also identified that this is now crazy. Okay. And then Kayla got back from the bathroom. Well, now you have 3 of the people bidding on Saquon Barkley.
Exactly.
When you just kind of stalled it out.
Yep. You've kept it going. Exactly. And I got bid up on both. That's exactly what happened to me with both T. Higgins and Pickens. I was about to get them for 23. Someone snuck 1 more or $2 more out of me because they knew maybe they listen to the show, maybe they know that those are guys I like to some degree here. So yes, it's an important strategy just to make things a little bit tougher on the other managers.
The other thing, this happened in our draft. So when we're talking about nomination strategy, you had said, don't be afraid to go aggressive early, especially if it's like Christian McCaffrey, whatever. I think some people counter that by tossing out players that they don't like. And this is what I do all the time. So for example, this year, I will not have Devon Achane. There is not a point in the draft where I'm taking Devon Achane relative to other people. I guess maybe in round 6, right? And he's normally a top 24, if not top 36 guy.
Yep.
When I want to get one of those guys out, especially early on, let's just say in the first 3 rounds, if you're doing a normal draft, that sort of value player, I'm tossing them out immediately, because my thought is, in this case of this 14-team league, there are 13 other people that theoretically have the money to bid on Devon Achane to the price that he probably should go for.
Exactly.
Do other people like Devon Achane? Maybe not. Maybe there's only 7 or 8. But because I'm doing it early, that makes it that those 7 or 8 could build their roster around getting of Devon Achane. So I will do that all the time, whether it be quarterback or running back. But I'll also nominate a player to figure out what that position tier looks like, specifically a quarterback.
In most cases, I'd say 10 of my first 15 nominations are players that I don't want. in almost every case here. It's either I look through that top tier of players. Of course, sometimes I end up buying them because everybody else doesn't want them and there's such a value there. But more often than not, it doesn't happen. I look through that top tier of players and I pick players that are expensive that I know I don't want on my team. Just like you said with A-Chain, it's something like that. I should have examples off the top of my head for this segment here. But like, well, for example, I knew in a 14-team league, I wasn't going to pay for Christian McCaffrey. I wasn't going to do it because yes, he's a game changer. But I can't throw 30% of my entire budget at one player in stake league and have that one injury risk. It's not part of my strategy, right? So I wanted to get him out here. I was also throwing out pretty early. You've talked me out of Kyron Williams this year, so
Oh, good.
I went and I got him out a bit early here. I threw Puka out early because I'm a Cooper Kupp guy this year. A couple of these, I think Bijan Robinson's getting a little bit overhyped, and he's someone that I just had a chance to take him, but I took CeeDee Lamb instead in the snake draft. So those types of guys are guys that I throw out there early because I know there are going to be a bunch of people that want to bid on there. The other side of nominating is after I bought $7 Joe Burrow, I knew I wasn't going to buy another quarterback. So my next several nominations were Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts. Obviously, Mahomes didn't go for what I quite thought he would, but I wanted to get money out of other people's pockets. So I bid. So I put the top tier quarterbacks out there for people. After I bought $13 Kittle, well, I knew I wasn't going to buy Kelsey or Kincaid or Laporta or even Hawkinson, anybody else in that tier. So I started nominating tight ends to get more money out of other owners' pockets here. So I would be more competitive in that, $25 wide receiver tier, which I was looking at next. So really, and then of course, towards the end of the draft, when you get down to all the dollar players, obviously you're nominating people you want then. When you're towards the end of the draft and you know that, for example, you only have $5 left, that's your max bid, and there's a guy that you want, you nominate them at $5. I actually made the mistake because, of course, I drafted Nick Chubb for $9. I really wanted to get Jerome Ford. That was one of my big targets. I had $5 left. I know he went for more in your league because of how the league went, but that was realistic given the overpriced running backs earlier on. I made the mistake of Benzine. I had $5 left as the max bid. Benzine had him at $3. What I should have done is type 5 and bid. But what I did is I upbid to 4 and then he upbid to 5 and he went off the board for 5. So I missed him. So that was the
can I interject?
The one thing I regret, but yeah.
Because there's another part of this too. And we are running low on time. And I want to talk about a different phenomenon that I have never seen before in doing this. But to your point, this scenario happened to me where I had 2 players left. I had $6. My max bid then can be $5, right? Because the other player would be $1. I looked, and at least on ESPN, you can click a button and see what everyone else's max bid is. And I knew a guy like Ray Davis, a rookie running back who's going to be in a rotational aspect for the Bills with James Cook, is going to be valued in this format. I was going to make sure that I would get Ray Davis as my last running back in this equation. Somebody else also had a $5 nomination. If I would have just put Ray Davis out there number 1 overall, just put for $1, somebody could have bid him up right to 5 and I would have lost. So the idea was once it got to my nomination, I'm throwing Ray Davis out there and I'm throwing for $5, making it so that person who also had 5 as a max bid cannot get him. Exactly. That's a strategy to do at the end. You have to be mindful of it, but that's one of those things you can definitely pull off.
Yeah, I was going to say most major draft rooms will have an easy way. Sometimes it's not super user friendly, but there's a way to view max bids. If you're like me and have gotten so good at typing and logging all the bids with the RotoWire software over the years, that will show you the max bids. Our web-based assistant that live syncs with a lot of the major platforms now will show you the other owners' max bids too. So there's a lot of different ways to check that if you're doing things. And I'll just throw one last plug for the software out here. They have a feature that's called inflation. We didn't really talk about it this year. It's more for keeper leagues, kind of, but you set the formula calculates your auction values, right? And then players start going off the board for higher than they're supposed to or lower than they're supposed to, right? And if that trend continues to happen, that changes the dollar value, the prices, projected prices for the rest of the players here. And if you hit update inflation, it'll run the calculation again based on every team's remaining budget here. And that can be a helpful feature too for the prices to be live adjusting there. So a couple of plugs for the Roto software there before we wrap up.
Oh, I love it. So and I'll outline this. Is going to be an article posted recapping my side of the RotoWire Stake League up on RotoWire. I hope by the end of the day. This has never happened before in the many years that I've done this draft now, but I felt like there was too much money left over for the middle rounds. And you're like, okay, well, yeah, if everyone's going to always leave some money over, or if you're doing it wrong, you don't leave any money and you're stuck on dollar days for 10 different players. We had like an abnormal amount. So I went and tallied it based off of your league. Again, same scoring system, same sort of general premise that we want to be able to have the most points scored weeks 1 through 18 to get our meal paid for. I went and looked over the cross comparison. 7 of the 12 players that our league spent more money on than yours, the highest, 12 most, were players that I was involved in. And I don't think it was just me. Like, I'm not doing Joe's so good or so smart. People are copying it. It was that we all had money at the same time. And I had a lot of money at these certain junctions. So other than Derrick Henry, who went for 43, I think he went for 36 in yours. Marvin Harrison went for 35 in ours, and I think he had a 27, 28. Those were only 2 high-priced guys, and they're both in the middle of the draft. Otherwise, it was within the last 100 players or so, and you're looking around, and while I would sit at maybe 45, you had 10 other people that were sitting in the 25, 30 range. That's not good. And not good, at least if you're trying to be aggressive in getting your backups. And what resulted was $17 Zach Moss, $10 Rico Dowdle, $10 Blake Corum, and you're like, oh, you got him for 3. That's a good deal for you. I like Blake Corum enough where it's totally fine. And in our league format, that's what had to happen. I got Tony Pollard for 18. I don't like Tony Pollard all that much, but like Brian Robinson went for 16. These are all the running backs that you would normally see in round 7 through 9 that ended up getting priced at least $10 or at least $6 to $10 more than your format, because 7 or 8 other people all had money left to the extreme that I've seen in past years. So when that happens, and I think you could agree with this, Jake, you need to be aggressive, because that is the quintessential concept of don't be the last to get your tier. I think Brian Robinson is significantly worse than than like a Zach Moss, right? Zach Moss went for 17. Brian Robinson went for $1 less. That seems dramatic to me. Tony Pollard, I think, has the upside better than both those. I took him for $2 more, but there's a lot of those running backs in that range that, because they were the last of the tier and people had a lot of money to spend, they did so. So that'd be the one recommendation. Be mindful of the money spent from others, because it could come back to bite you in certain spots.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very good piece of strategy, piece of advice to close on, for sure.
Cool. That does it for us on the Tuesday edition of the RotoWire podcast, of course, brought to you by Circa Sports. One amendment: we had talked earlier in the podcast that Tyrone Tracy had been carted off at an air cast and taken to a local hospital with a leg injury that seems to be season ending. No, that was just a high ankle sprain, Jake. So Tyrone Tracy, rookie 5th round pick for the Giants, will likely play at some point this season. But I had mentioned that it seemed like it was a catastrophic injury. That's what all the reports indicated. Not so. So Tyrone Tracy, sorry about that. If you were
knocks him out, I think it knocks him out of redraft leagues though. If he's someone, he's going to miss the first 4 or 5 weeks of the year. That knocks him. We'll talk about him on our waiver wire show at some point down the road, but knocks him out of the contention in redraft. And also, as of about 4 p.m. Eastern time, we have no Brandon Ayuk trade yet.
Sorry for teasing everyone again if you're listening live. Again, Ian Rappaport had tweeted earlier, probably maybe 30 minutes before the show, that the Steelers have a framework in place for the Ayuk trade, but the Niners have not hit the accept button yet, if we're using our trade language. We'll see if the Niners choose to do that, or if there'll be more negotiating on a contract that they don't want to sign with Brandon Ayuk in the coming days.
Ayuk, again, $24 in your league, $27 in my league. So the market's still treating him pretty highly.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Again, thank you everyone for listening to the Tuesday edition. We'll be back again next week. I'm pretty sure we'll be live. I'll be in office, whatever else. But stay tuned to Jake's Twitter at RotoJake, and then mine at JB Fantasy Sports if there's any changes that we need to be made. And again, there will be a live auction draft. We have to figure out the date yet. We have to really settle that in, Jake, in the coming days that we'll also be tweeting out. So stay tuned, both our social media accounts or RotoWire's account. I'm sure we'll push it out there too. So thanks everyone for listening.